The New Orleans Saints are looking to find ways to catch their rhythm early on in games, but the good news is that things are heading in the right direction when it comes to wide receiver. We got all that and a little bit of lanyard for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all podcast apps, including on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. It is Tuesday here on Locked On Saints, which means we take our deeper dive going into the analytics around the New Orleans Saints loss against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're going to start off over on the offensive side. This New Orleans Saints offense, admittedly, is just looking for ways to figure out how to get their rhythm established. And the good news for the New Orleans Saints is that wide receiver is not going to be a problem for them this year as long as the unit stays healthy. They're in a really, really good place here. What do I mean by that? Well, it's simple. We saw a lot of deep shots in this game. Chris Olave ran 21, you can even argue 22 different routes, not all of which was he targeted on, but at least 21 different routes in which his route carried him 15 yards or more downfield. That's a lot for what we're used to seeing with the New Orleans Saints, who, Chris Olave ran 16 such routes last week. So it was a little bit of a boost for him going into this one. And they took some of those additional shots downfield, 9 different shots downfield like that. But for the Saints, the issue had a lot to do with ball placement, anticipation, a little bit of pressure stuff. And then, just you had Chris Olave make a big catch down the field, falls down, fumbles, things like that, right? Like there was just a lot here that's a little bit of bad luck and a little bit of stuff that is adjustable, things that you can fix. Jameis usually doesn't have it. Quarterback Jameis Winston doesn't usually have plays that he misses downfield. So that you're going to be able to hit those, and they feel really good about that. Dennis Allen spoke about it on Monday, that as the game kind of evolved, it's not that plays are specifically designed to go downfield, but the coverage kind of dictates where the ball goes. And so if you look back at the first interception, right, with Chris Olave down the field, this is a cover 2. Chris Olave is running a post in the middle of the field. Jamel Dean makes a fantastic play in terms of making up ground. Maybe Jameis can put the ball a little bit further to the outside next time, just separate Chris Olave a little bit, but Dean just makes a great play on the ball. It wasn't a bad decision. Just, placement could be a little bit better or something like that. You had the overthrow to Juwan Johnson. That's just an overthrow, but it was the right read. He was open, right? You look at the interception that ended up going for a pick 6 by the defensive back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That one was to Jarvis Landry, probably Jameis's best option in that play. However, you have Jarvis Landry kind of break down and then come towards the inside side of the numbers on the right side of the field. And instead of Jameis throwing it down and outside, he kind of throws it up and inside, and that gives Edwards the opportunity to be able to fight that ball away from Jarvis Landry. So it's just little things like that led to the takeaways. There were some other shots that he took downfield where receivers were open underneath. And that's why I say that receiver isn't really going to be the issue for the New Orleans Saints. Last year, separation was such a big part of the conversation around why the New Orleans Saints struggled in 2021. This year, these wide receivers are getting that separation. You look at the separation leader from last week, Chris Olave, he didn't have as much separation in this game, but is that surprising? He was at 1.66 yards of separation per target in this game, targeted 13 different times. Is that something you should be concerned about? I don't think so. Remember, he ran at least 21 different routes that effectively just sent him down the field, 9 of which were go routes. Just run, Chris. Do what you got to do. And so if you're not making a break, or if you're not, pulling a double move, if you're not doing those things, you might not be able to create the separation. You just have to be faster than the other guy that's in front of you. And if the other guy's playing with cushion, if the other guy is fast, those things can factor in. So I'm not too worried about Chris Olave's lesser separation in week 2 as opposed to week 1. But you look at Jarvis Landry, who had 5.27 yards per target. Remember, this is separation per target, which means it's not that Jameis wasn't throwing him the ball or anything like that. He was throwing him the ball when he was separating, on average, 5.25 yards every time, right? The one exception, of course, being the interception that ended up going back for the pick 6. So, but every other time, every other target, the 4 other targets that Jameis went to Jarvis, you saw a completion there. Michael Thomas was separating by 2.02 yards on average per his targets, 9 targets in this game. So that'll drop your average a little bit, but that's really good for Michael Thomas, who's a guy that isn't really like a separation guy. He doesn't need it. He can make the catch. What was it that Drew said? If he has a step, he's open, right? So it's that type of mentality when it comes to Michael Thomas. So the separation is there. These guys are getting open. It's just decision-making. It's just ball placement. It's just anticipation, things like that. And there are a lot of things that can also factor in. Where is that player creating separation? On what side of the field is he? And on what side of the field are Jameis Winston's eyes? And that can be altered by the coverage. That can be altered by the pass rush. Is there a throwing window there? Or is the offensive and defensive line clumped up and he can't get a pass through there? I know he's tall, don't get me wrong, but that's something that can happen too. So there's a lot of factors that go into all of these like conversations and stuff like that. And it's not as cut and dry as man open, man throw ball, man catch ball. It's not that simple, right? And I'm not saying anybody's diminishing it to that, but just something to keep in mind when we're talking about these numbers, right? We're not trying to sit here and say, hey, the receivers are getting open, Jameis just isn't getting them the ball. That would be untrue, right? Because again, all of these are separation by target. So these are what their separation is when he is getting them the ball, right? That's the absolute practice of this stat. So that's the importance of it. So when you look at all of this, the thing that you can take away from it is, yeah, the New Orleans Saints had a little bit of trouble getting started, had a lot of trouble getting started, and have had trouble getting started over on the offensive side, weeks 1 and week 2. But all hope isn't lost because the pieces individually are there. You just need all of the instruments to play at the same time, right? You need them all to harmonize with one another. And so when you have Alvin Kamara back and he's running through these gargantuan holes that the offensive line is creating, which will break the offensive line down here in a little bit, in terms of what kind of one last remaining step that would make a huge difference for them is. But you have that, you have this offense with these receivers that you have to respect. So it's forcing you to be in lighter defensive personnel packages and stretching that defense laterally before the snap happens, all of those things. All of that comes together and then you're able to play the beautiful music, right? But you have to be able to get all of those pieces together early on. None of it can happen if the offensive line can't get into rhythm as well. I think the offensive line showed some steps forward here in week 2, but there's one specific element that if the New Orleans Saints can get right, especially going into an aggressive defensive matchup next week against the Carolina Panthers, they'll take a monumental step forward. We'll break down what that is and how the New Orleans Saints can do it and how it will benefit the team here in just a moment as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. But before we get to that, I have the great pleasure of telling you all about our friends over at LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn Jobs is one of my favorite places to go, or it was when I was looking for a job. I'm very happy, very comfortable now, so I don't have to do it as much as I did before. But when I was looking for jobs and I was looking for things in podcasting and everything, I used LinkedIn Jobs along with 40 million other weekly job seekers over at LinkedIn. So if you're somebody that's looking for a job, that's a place for you to go. But if you're somebody that's looking to hire, this is absolutely the place that you should be. You can set up things like screening questions to make sure that you're getting the qualified candidates that you're looking for. And when it comes to LinkedIn Jobs, small businesses voted them #1 when it came to delivering quality candidates versus their competitors. So you can post your job for free there. You can also change your profile picture on your LinkedIn profile to that purple hiring banner so that people know that you're hiring. And then it's going to allow you to make sure that LinkedIn Jobs does what it does, which is finding you the best candidates to talk to faster. Like I mentioned, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn Jobs every week. That's absolutely a number that you want to take advantage of. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks again, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day. Tomorrow is Film Watch Wednesday. We're going to break down how the touchdown happened with Brashad Perryman, with PJ Williams in coverage. Why was he in coverage? And more importantly, why was he in coverage on the outside? It was a really good game plan by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers there, and a formation and sort of personnel grouping that I think you're going to see a lot from the New Orleans Saints over the course of this year, one that took advantage of that very, very talented wide receiver core. So we'll break all of that down in tomorrow's episode. But in order for anything to take place, regardless of the personnel, the formation, groupings, things like that, you have to have the protection up front. Let me say this: 6 sacks, 10 sacks over the course of the first 2 games, not good. However, not all of that can be attributed, particularly the 6 sacks in the Week 2 game against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, to strictly the offensive line. Again, not so cut and dry. Guy gets sack, offensive line bad. It doesn't work that way. There's a lot of other factors that go into it. But if the New Orleans Saints offensive line can fix this one thing, then they're going to be in a much better place. And that thing is simple. Well, it's simple to see, not simple to fix. Otherwise, you and I would be getting paid a lot more money because we can see it on the field and say, hey, that needs to get fixed, but we can't actually fix it. So my thing for the New Orleans Saints is you fix your blitz identification issues, and then you're in a really good place. The offensive line held up really well when it came to the run game. It held up pretty well during pass protection, with the exception of when Tampa Bay was like, okay, they're playing from behind, they're throwing the ball, we got to pin our ears back. It's kind of the opposite of what Jameis Winston told us last week after they had the win in Atlanta about the hurry up offense, and that, hey, we knew we were passing the ball, so like everyone was on the same page. We all knew that. The flip side of the benefit of that, which would be for the offense that they know what they're doing, is that the defense also knows what you're doing. They also know that you're going to be throwing the ball, and so they're able to pin their ears back and come after the quarterback. But the New Orleans Saints gave up 6 sacks, 2 of which you can attribute to Ryan Ramczyk, 1 of which was attributed to, I believe it was Andrus Peat, and then the others were unattributed, which usually means that that quarterback, or the quarterback, is the one that does it. And if you think about it, you had the one that ended up being a fumble, which was recovered by James Hurst, good hustle play by James Hurst, where Jameis Winston scrambled to the outside, was tempted to go downfield to Jarvis Landry, who was just streaking over the middle. I mean, he was right there. So I understand why Jameis kind of held up a little bit, but then somebody caught him from behind, knocked the ball out, and he was able to get it. Another one, he was scrambling over to the right side, hesitated to run, ended up, the linebacker was able to close on him. It was a sack for no gain, basically. And then there was another to where you just held onto the ball for a little bit too long, and then the only thing you can do at that point is attribute the sack to the quarterback. So you look at all of that, and you look at the offensive line, and you say, okay, where can things get fixed? And the big piece is going to be that blitz identification. One of the sacks that was credited to Ryan Ramczyk was one to where you had 2 linebackers, I believe it was Lavonte David as well as Devin White, challenging the B gap. So the A gap is between the guard and center, but the B gap is between the guard and tackle, so just a little bit toward the outside. It was clear that they thought that the inside blitzer was going to be the one to come in. So that's who Cesar Ruiz was watching. Ryan Ramczyk was blocking to the outside. That linebacker threatens. Cesar Ruiz commits. That linebacker runs away. So Cesar Ruiz does what is the correct practice for what the play call was, which is go help the center. And then that led Devin White, or the other linebacker, come right up on a delayed blitz. And he was completely untouched going in there. So the issue isn't that Cesar Ruiz made the wrong read. The issue isn't that Ryan Ramczyk did anything wrong. The issue is that the play call and the protection setup was to expect this blitzer, not that blitzer. So when that blitzer bailed, Cesar Ruiz's next job is not, okay, look at the other linebacker. It's protect the inside. Don't allow the immediate pressure inside. Go and help the center. So because of that, it's not really anyone's fault in terms of the play itself. It's what happens before the play. It's the pre-snap reads. It's the protection calls. It's all those things. I'm going to evoke the name. This is the difference between 16 years of Drew Brees and a quarterback that is only 3 years in the system, right? Anybody. I'm not even talking about Drew Brees and Jameis Winston specifically. Drew Brees and any quarterback that's in the system for 3 years there's going to be a difference. And that's one of those differences. Making those protection calls, things like that. And that's, I believe, a joint thing that is a shared responsibility. It's not all on Jameis to do that. And sometimes you have, one player will make the protection calls in the front 7. Another will make a protection call if there's something happening in the secondary. One will watch the secondary. The other will kind of make the play, things like that. So there's a whole bunch of different shared responsibilities that could also impact that as well. The other sack that happened was one to where you had a double team on the left side, which was another ace block. So the ace block is when you protect the A gap. So that's the guard in the center. To where Vita Vea takes up 2 blockers. Devin White challenges to the outside, swings around the inside, clear shot at Jameis Winston there. That's one that goes unattributed because everyone was doing their responsibilities. It's just that you didn't identify the linebacker that would be blitzing, right? So it was a protection thing again. If the Saints can fix the protections, and they have a big test with that going up against an aggressive defense in the Carolina Panthers next weekend, then they're in a much, much better situation on the offensive side, and particularly for the offensive line as well. Because when they got those right, the offensive line bought Jameis time. He wasn't under a ton of pressure. All told, according to Pro Football Focus, they only allowed 8 pressures. Allowed 8 pressures, meaning that someone got beat, right? That there was an inefficiency on the offensive line, not that there were more pass rushers than there were pass blockers. Not that they identified the wrong player and then moved deeper into, their responsibilities and then had another player that was able to come in and get the sack. There are those, or a scrambling quarterback getting to the outside but not being able to break the plane. Those are pressures or sacks that happen that go unattributed, but that still impact the game. So 11 pressures, my apologies, was 8 hurries, but it was 11 pressures total. That ends up being in a situation to where you can only attribute so much to the offensive line. The other thing is you just kind of have to get right. If they can get that right, then they're in a much better place. Lastly, to wrap up the show today, Marshon Lattimore is exactly the guy that we expected him to be early on this season. And that is fantastic news for the New Orleans Saints. I'll tell you why as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Before we get to that, I'm going to tell you about our friends over at Bet Online, your number one source for all the sports wagering information that you need. New Orleans Saints opening up as 2.5-point favorites on the road. So Vegas not necessarily looking at a loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as something that is diminishing their opportunity, the New Orleans Saints, to bounce back going against Carolina. There'll be a couple of things to watch. Will Alvin Kamara be healthy? Is Jameis Winston's back okay? Will Paulson Adebo be healthy and be a part of that defense going up against maybe, a lesser talented wide receiver core than the one that they just went up against, although the Tampa Bay was dealing with injuries, things like that. Lots of things that you're going to watch that could potentially move that line throughout the week, but if you want to jump on it early, Bet Online is your place to do that. You can also take a look at point totals, over-unders, you can look at game props, player props, all those things as well. They got it all for you for the NFL, but there's also NBA, MLB, NHL, esports, whatever it is that you're looking for, combat sports as well. They got you covered, taking care of our exclusive online betting partners here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's Bet Online, where the game starts. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a simple celebration of Marshon Lattimore because, yeah, he got ejected in this past weekend's game, but Marshon Lattimore has this gauntlet of wide receivers that he's going up against this year. I mean, he already went up against guys like Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Mike Evans, his son. But then he's also going to be going up against guys like DJ Moore, who's a fantastic but underrated wide receiver. Devontae Adams, he's got the speedy Baltimore receivers that he's going to be going up against as well. Like, there's so many of these kind of top level wide receivers that he's going to be going up against. And so far through 2 games, he has proven to be lockdown Lattimore. He has proven to be the guy that you expect him to be. Now, it doesn't mean that he's not going to allow a touchdown at some point during the season. It doesn't mean that he's not going to have something go awry. This is what happens when you're a cornerback. You have highs, you have lows, things like that. But if you come in with more highs than lows, you're an elite corner. So when it comes to Marshon Lattimore, he's been absolutely outstanding. Played just under 50 snaps in this game, was matched up with Mike Evans on 30 of those snaps, 14 of which being passing plays, and he allowed 1 catch for 7 yards on a drag route and was only targeted twice. And by the way, the other time that he was targeted that ended up being an incompletion, he forced the ball out on a pass breakup. Marshon Lattimore is that guy, and he's playing like it right now. And that is wildly important for the New Orleans Saints right now, because if they're not able to, or as they struggle right now, or let me not say struggle, let me say it this way. As they progress in their pursuit of figuring out their identity on the offensive side and establishing rhythm a little bit early, they're going to need the defense to hold them up. And we have seen that over the course of the past couple of weeks because they're not allowing the big explosive plays. Yes, there was one big play down the right sideline to Mike Evans. That happened because they lined him up in the slot, got him matched up with Justin Evans. Justin Evans runs into the other Tampa Bay wide receiver, and Mike Evans is wide open down the right sideline. The other time that it happened was the 28-yard touchdown to Brashad Perriman, which we'll break down in tomorrow's Film Watch Wednesday, which was PJ Williams in coverage. And the only reason why that happened is because of the fact that you pushed the you push the depth chart down a little bit. Marcus May was still in the game at that time. Tyrann Mathieu was still in the game at that time. Then you had Bradley Roby, who moved into the slot. You had Alontae Taylor, who was on the outside, and then you needed another corner, and that ended up being PJ Williams over on the outside. So it all happened for a reason, both of those big explosive plays, but that's it. The New Orleans Saints are doing a great job minimizing those explosive plays, and specifically, they're minimizing them with Marshon Lattimore on the field because Marshon Lattimore is taking them away. This is one of the reasons why the return of Paulson Adebo is really important for the New Orleans Saints, because it's important to have those two players opposite one another because they have both been lights out over the course of camp. You just hope that Paulson Adebo's ankle injury is something that, because they've really taken their time with it, doesn't hinder him moving forward. I can understand the New Orleans Saints being a little, excuse the phrase, I'll just say it this way, shy when it comes to, or coy when it comes to ankle injuries, just considering recent history, right? Like, you don't want to make the wrong decision there. Completely get it. But for the New Orleans Saints, knowing that Marshon Lattimore is playing the way that he is playing is something that gives that defense a ton of confidence. When you're a pass rusher that knows, if I can just get this quarterback off their mark a little bit, force an errant throw in Marshon Lattimore's direction, he'll be able to take advantage of that. Plus Marcus May, plus Tyrann Mathieu, plus hopefully Paulson Adebo here soon. When you're a linebacker that knows, okay, I can focus on my responsibilities in the middle of the field. I don't even have to think about anything that goes over there in a zone because Marshon's got that zone. He's Gucci. When they're in man coverage, I don't have to worry about, if I don't have a responsibility, if I don't have a player that's, coming up, or, I'm supposed to block this running back, let's say, and that running back stays in to provide additional protection. That allows me to freelance a little bit. But the thing that also allows me to freelance is I don't have to worry about half of the field because Marshon's got that, right? So I can blitz. I can catch this guy that's coming over the middle. I can take a look and see what else is happening. I can wait to see if that running back chips and releases and then be there for that play. Is it going to be a screen where it's all just a little bit delayed? I can be a little bit more confident about attacking my keys and the things that I have to watch because I know I ain't got to worry about Marshon Lattimore because Marshon Lattimore's got Marshon Lattimore. Like, Lattimore Island is over there. It is inhabited. Marshon is charging rent and, doing all that. So it's a whole thing. So it's helpful, right? And Marshon is somebody that we knew coming into this game as one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, as one of the best. I mean, you look at that 2017 year where he and Alvin Kamara split offensive and defensive player of the year. Marshon in his rookie year at cornerback, Kamara in his rookie year at running back. There's a reputation and an expectation there for Marshon Lattimore. And so far, he is matching that. He is arriving. He's meeting the moment, which is not easy in the NFL when you're going up against some of the best athletes in the world. But when you are one of the best athletes in the world, especially at your position, it's not surprising when you're doing what it is that Marshon Lattimore has done. Lattimore so far, in terms of the key players that he has gone up against, allowed only one combined catch between Kyle Pitts and Drake London. Allowed only one catch against Mike Evans. And in some places, depending upon where you look, they don't even credit that to Marshon Lattimore, but he was in man coverage. Mike Evans was on a drag route. He just wasn't the nearest defender technically, but it was still his assignment. But you'll give him that. You give him 1 7-yard catch all day long. But him fighting that ball out on the right sideline, fighting all the way through the ground, that's Marshon Lattimore. That's the player that doesn't give up. And make no mistake about it. Marshon Lattimore being at Tom Brady's neck because Tom Brady's 40 yards down the line, down the field complaining to a referee, that's Marshon Lattimore too. And that's part of what makes him special is that tenacity. It doesn't just come out in his play. It comes out in his representation of himself as a player. So I'm all aboard the Marshon Lattimore train for the season because he has already shown you thus far what it is that he is able to do and how special he can be. And if he keeps that up, that's huge. Marshon Lattimore wasn't on the field for the 28-yard touchdown or the 20-plus yard touchdown between Tom Brady and Brashad Perriman. What went wrong there? We'll break that down, but also what will go right for the New Orleans Saints as their offense, particularly passing offense, continues to evolve throughout the season. We'll break that down as well. And tomorrow's Film Watch Wednesday, very excited to get back to those. Appreciate you as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Everything you need. I don't know why I did like scat. I don't know. Anyway, You can go and check out the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. All the news that you need around the NFL in less than 30 minutes with NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson. As always, y'all, I appreciate you so much for making me a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, N-O-L-A. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.